If you want to just keep putting words in my mouth, the TV cameras are outside.
The FBI cannot be weaponized, and under your leadership, it has been nothing but a weapon alongside the president to go after the president's perceived opponents, to stifle dissent and free speech. A few weeks ago, as we saw through a social media post that you quickly deleted.
I know who was targeted by a weaponized FBI? Me. You want to know how and why?
Well,
you want to know what I'm doing to fix it?
That. Let me move on.
Well, you should read the book because there's no enemies list on that book.
So that in your proposal today, you find yourself at a gulf of difference between you and the president. I wonder how you will resolve that. Will you go to the president and say we need $11.2 billion?
Questions about the FBI's independence have only intensified since Kash Patel became director. Congressional investigations, internal FBI restructuring, and repeated clashes over allegations of political retaliation have kept the Bureau under constant scrutiny. Against that backdrop, one of the most explosive moments came when Representative Madeleine Dean accused FBI Director Kash Patel of weaponizing the Bureau and even suggested he committed perjury. Patel fired back immediately, turning a routine budget hearing into one of the day's most heated confrontations.
I've been looking at the president's 120-word FBI budget request, the so-called skinny, I'll call it Ozempic request, that states that, quote, the undoing of the weaponization of the FBI is one of the administration's top priorities. The weaponization of the FBI is something that deeply concerns me. It should concern all of us. And yet, since taking office, President Trump has been on a revenge tour. He has targeted individuals, universities, law firms, with executive orders to cut them out or to make them come under his will. He has used ICE to disappear U.S. citizens without due process, and he's fully ignored a unanimous Supreme Court order, and then over the weekend wasn't sure if he was obligated to uphold the Constitution of the United States. In your book, your recent book, Government Gangsters, you include an appendix with a list of names that people have referred to as an enemies list. Now, I know you will claim it's just an appendix, not an enemies list. So let's focus on how the president sees it, on what the president calls it. And you proudly display his quote on the front cover of your book. The president calls this a brilliant roadmap, a blueprint. And I have not even raised your storied children's book, The Plot Against the King. It concerns me how many people from this blueprint have been targeted with executive orders and FBI investigations. The FBI cannot be weaponized, and under your leadership, it has been nothing but a weapon alongside the president to go after the president's perceived opponents, to stifle dissent and free speech. A few weeks ago, as we saw through a social media post that you quickly deleted, the FBI arrested a judge in Wisconsin for correctly asking ICE officials if they had a judicial warrant instead of an administrative warrant, which they did not have. Despite this judge following the law, on the morning of April the 25th, the FBI arrested the judge in an escalation of the weaponization of the FBI under your leadership. Let me be clear. A functioning democracy does not lock up judges. I am gravely concerned about the utter lack of independence of the FBI and its weaponization under your leadership. I am concerned that the president is using this book, your book, as a blueprint, as he has said. It's a blueprint for revenge. And I am concerned that your eagerness, a childlike giddiness to carry out the president's revenge tour, you've shown yourself to be unserious in your statements before you were sworn in and some after. You've shown yourself unfit to lead this important agency. I was an impeachment manager for President Trump's second impeachment. It was a sad, solemn duty. And so I wanted to ask you about that. Mr. Patel, as you and the president continue to weaponize and investigate his perceived enemies, as you follow this blueprint, when can I, a former impeachment manager, expect the FBI at my door?
Ma'am, you want to know who was targeted by a weaponized FBI? Me. You want to know how and why?
Well,
you want to know what I'm doing to fix it?
That. let me move on.
Well, you should
Change
read the
topics.
book because there's no enemies
So-
list on that book.
So
There are
you-
people that violated their constitutional obligations and their duties to the American people.
That's good. You
And they
gave
were
them due
rightly
process.
called out.
I'm
And you
changing
should
topics.
give that book to every one of your constituents
I'm
so they can
changing
read
topics.
about it.
I won't be doing that.
That's their loss.
During your Senate confirmation hearings, you repeatedly denied having any involvement as a private citizen in the firing of FBI officials who engaged in the prosecution against January 6 insurrectionists, the violent rioters who beat and killed Capitol police officers, and whom you referred to as political prisoners. Since then, multiple whistleblowers have come forward, and we know that you likely committed perjury. At the same hearing, you claimed you were not familiar with Stu Peters, an anti-Semitic Holocaust denier, despite the fact that you appeared on Mr. Peters' podcast 8 separate times. 8 times. And you claimed not to recall. Mr. Patel, my second question is, should we worry more about your memory or your veracity?
We should worry more about your lack of candor. You're accusing me of committing
Veracity?
perjury. Tell the American
You didn't
people how
know.
I broke the law and committed a felony.
You did,
Have the
but-
audacity to actually
No,
put the
all right,
facts
then
forward
the answer is
instead of
both.
lying for political banter so you can have a 20-second
answer
donation hit.
The answer is both. I believe that the
The
men and
answer is
women of
you're
the
failing,
Speak,
not
I
me.
reclaim my time.
Go ahead.
Mr. Patel, I believe that the members of the FBI, and I know many of them, many retired, 38,000 people, as you say, it's a little less than that now, deserve the very best, deserve extraordinary independence, deserve freedom from the fears of being investigated, the freedom of coming forward to make sure they're doing their job. And I'll end with this, that I think it's interesting that in your proposal today, you find yourself at a gulf of difference between you and the president. I wonder how you will resolve that. Will you go to the president and say, we need $11.2 billion, not what you cut out of here? You're asking for more than $1 billion than the president's request. Are you going to go to the president and straighten out that gulf?
I'll do what I've always done and represent the American people, defend this country, and make sure the Constitution is always upheld and the FBI is never weaponized. Maybe you should do the same.
So you agree with the president when he says he doesn't know if he should uphold his constitutional duty?
If you want to just keep putting words in my mouth, the TV cameras are outside.
I thank you. I yield back. Again, this is an unserious moment, sadly, for the FBI. I yield back.
More so for you.
The heated confrontation you just watched was never simply about one exchange between Representative Madeleine Dean and FBI Director Kash Patel. It reflected a much larger debate that has continued for more than a year, whether the FBI is being restored after years of alleged political bias, or whether it has become vulnerable to a different kind of political influence under new leadership. Since this hearing on May 7th, 2025, several verified developments have kept these same issues in the national spotlight. The first major issue involved the FBI's budget. During this hearing, Patel surprised lawmakers by publicly disagreeing with the Trump administration's own budget proposal. While the White House requested roughly $10.2 billion for the FBI, Patel testified that the Bureau actually needed approximately $11.2 billion to carry out its mission. That disagreement immediately became one of the biggest stories from the hearing because it showed an unusual public split between an FBI director and the administration that appointed him. Patel later continued arguing that the Bureau required additional funding to combat violent crime, terrorism, cyber threats, and transnational criminal organizations. The second major development involved the leadership changes Patel began implementing inside the FBI after this hearing. He announced plans to move roughly 1,000 agents and intelligence personnel out of FBI headquarters in Washington and into field offices across the country, arguing that more investigators should work directly in local communities instead of remaining in headquarters. Supporters described the move as decentralizing the Bureau and putting more agents where violent crime occurs. Critics questioned whether such rapid restructuring could disrupt ongoing investigations and reduce institutional expertise inside headquarters. The debate over FBI independence also continued throughout late 2025. Reports described Patel removing or reassigning several senior FBI officials, disbanding certain internal units, and increasing the use of internal investigations to identify unauthorized leaks. Supporters argued these actions were necessary to reform an agency they believed had become politicized over previous years. Critics argued the changes risked creating uncertainty among career personnel and raised new questions about political influence inside the Bureau. Another issue raised during this hearing involved the arrest of Wisconsin Circuit Judge Hannah Dugan, which Representative Dean cited as an example of what she viewed as FBI weaponization. That case continued after this hearing. Federal prosecutors pursued obstruction charges, and later in 2025 a jury found Dugan guilty of felony obstruction. She subsequently resigned from the bench in early 2026. Supporters of the prosecution argued the verdict demonstrated that no public official is above the law. Critics continued expressing concern about the broader implications of arresting a sitting judge during an ongoing immigration dispute. Meanwhile, another development added a different dimension to Patel's own claims that the FBI had previously been weaponized. In February 2026, Reuters reported that investigators during the Biden administration had secretly obtained phone records belonging to Kash Patel and current White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles during an earlier federal investigation. Patel argued that those disclosures reinforced his long-standing criticism that federal investigative powers had been misused for political purposes. However, Reuters also noted that those disclosures did not, by themselves, establish that any laws had been broken or prove Patel's broader political allegations. Those developments explain why this hearing continues to receive attention today. Representative Madeleine Dean built her questioning around one central concern, that the FBI had shifted from being an independent law enforcement agency to becoming an instrument used against the president's perceived political opponents. She pointed to President Trump's endorsement of Patel's book Government Gangsters, questioned the arrest of the Wisconsin judge, raised concerns about Patel's confirmation testimony, and suggested that political retaliation, not neutral law enforcement, was influencing FBI decisions. Patel rejected every one of those allegations. Instead, he argued that he himself had been the victim of what he called a weaponized FBI during previous investigations. He defended his book as exposing government misconduct rather than creating an enemies list, insisted that his mission was to restore constitutional policing, and challenged Dean directly when she suggested he may have committed perjury. That exchange became the defining moment of the hearing because Patel demanded that Dean identify any actual felony he had committed rather than making political accusations. It is important to separate verified facts from political arguments. It is a matter of public record that Representative Dean accused Patel of helping weaponize the FBI and questioned whether he had been truthful during his Senate confirmation hearings. It is equally true that Patel categorically denied those accusations during this hearing. As of today, there has been no criminal charge, indictment, or judicial finding that Kash Patel committed perjury in connection with the testimony discussed by Representative Dean. Likewise, Patel's repeated claims that previous administrations weaponized federal law enforcement remain matters of political and legal debate. Some subsequent disclosures, including the reporting about investigative subpoenas involving Patel, have been cited by his supporters as evidence supporting those concerns. Critics argue those disclosures do not establish a broader pattern of unlawful political targeting. Those competing interpretations remain unresolved in the political arena. Ultimately, this hearing became far more than a budget discussion. It exposed two fundamentally different visions of the FBI's future. One side argued that aggressive reforms are necessary to restore public trust after years of controversy. The other warned that those same reforms risk replacing one form of perceived political influence with another. As Congress continues overseeing the FBI's funding, leadership, and investigative powers, the issues raised during this exchange remain central to one of the most consequential debates surrounding federal law enforcement in the United States today.